So ever since 2020, we've seen the NFL slowly creep into the NBA's real estate of having Christmas Day games. And now they recently struck a deal with Netflix in which they'll be airing 2 NFL games on Christmas Day, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Steelers and the Ravens versus the Texans. And at the same time, these games will be available in those local markets for free. Now with streaming becoming the main source where people consume their content, we're seeing how the sports leagues are adapting to this, because removing themselves outside of traditional TV takes them away from a certain ecosystem that has been proven to work for the last 50, 60 years. And the money's always enticing to get them to leave that ecosystem. But now as the sports leagues begin to come over, we're going to slowly peel back the layers of within that ecosystem if they could even survive. Because for many other players outside of Netflix, streaming has not deemed to be profitable. And in this current landscape, we are witnessing Netflix beginning to change their business model from just only having a subscription-based model to an ad-driven model, very similar to Google and Facebook. Audiences could be targeted specifically, thus driving higher CPMs. A few of the players involved in streaming have an influx of cash like Amazon and Netflix, and an unlimited bandwidth for upcoming inventory. As we've seen the NBA as well as the NFL kind of expand their draft nights into a whole event, and that's really for streaming. The NBA added a whole second day just for second round draft picks, as well as the in-season tournament and the play-in. Those are all pieces of real estate that they can sell separately to the streaming services. And we could even mention things like All-Star Weekend, the dunk contest, the celebrity game, the All-Star game itself. These can be all sold off to streaming in separate packages. And keep in mind the potential for brand new revenue is almost unlimited as streaming is global. The internet connection gets you right into the platform. And this is where the NBA is trying to position themselves to be the leader of that forefront. They have a major edge on the NFL as far as the global appeal of the game, very similar to the game of soccer. The current media climate is in a state of transition, and it's not a mistake that we see outside players like Amazon and Netflix getting into more live events such as the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight, Formula One racing, etc. All these live events are helping these streaming companies gain an edge to help build out their in-house ad programs, very similar to Google AdSense and the way that Facebook does their ads. But the fellas at Sharp Tech gave some great insight to these dynamics playing out, especially with Netflix. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
I think it goes hand in hand with this NFL news. I mean, I think they were kind of telegraphing this when I wrote after their last earnings that, look, Netflix is, I guess they're not going slow to some extent, but they were definitely signaling we have work to do to build out our ad network. And it was only ever going to make sense in the long run if they did it themselves. It just takes time to do that. And so it worked out to partner with Microsoft to start. They're also going to be partnering with multiple sort of ad providers, and they'll be orchestrating that. And it's to some extent, they will want to get fully into it's probably just their platform completely. I mean, the way digital ads do work in general is there's different ways to serve ads, but it can be sort of like a waterfall thing where you serve your ads first, then you serve ads from another network if you haven't filled your inventory, then you fill something else. And maybe that's the sort of approach they're going to take to make sure they have their inventory sort of filled, broadly speaking. But no, it's no surprise. It goes hand in hand with the NFL thing. It's just all about building out these capabilities and getting scale. And that's going to take a while. Building ad tech platforms is no sort of small feat. Facebook and Google are still dramatically changing and enhancing their ad platforms. They've been at it for 20 years and are way more sophisticated than anybody else. So no, I'm not saying it's going to take Netflix 20 years per se, but to get to where they want to get, where it's not just, like TV, here's some ads, put them on.
And unlike regular TV, their ads have to have a tracker. That's where Facebook and Google have a separation. The companies that are running ads, they can see the results from it. They could even track it. If it has any leads to their website, all that is traceable with using Google Pixel, Facebook Pixel, etc. They have built-in ecosystems to make sure that these ads are even worth the spending dollars after a certain point. These are the types of things Netflix is going to have to build out. In a way, that's the conundrum of the streaming world. Any product like the NFL, the NBA, or even a piece of movie content, the ads that will be running are performance-based. And Netflix has all that data And the NBA, unlike the NFL, people are going to have to click and find these games. I'm sure Netflix and other ecosystems like Amazon or even Apple, they would make sure it will be displayed in the forefront. But at the same time, these companies never had to compete with their product being shown with 1,000 other movies or just reality TV shows or documentaries at the same time. These are brand new dynamics that are at play.
So you have some sort of tracking, to have some sort of, ideally they would want to, because again, the goal is not just the NFL. The goal is that they have an at-scale advertising tier with tens of millions of subscribers or hundreds of millions of subscribers. And the way you really pay that off is not just you're selling ads like TV, but you can get into some sort of like self-serve interface. Or maybe they'll never do self-serve because, it's a little dodgier as far as like, brand safety and TV stuff and all that. But they want to have sort of a scalable system that people can not just buy ads, but also know who the ads are being shown to. That's the whole payoff from digital. Netflix knows every viewer. They can measure every viewer on an individual basis, and whatever they know about that viewer, they want to build profiles based on what that viewer views. Like what's all the different Netflix content they're interested in? How can they use that to align that with particular demographics or buying things? Now, it's going to be harder for Netflix to get into the conversion part, like how many of those ads actually converted, but they will want to build integrations with third-party measurement firms who do go out and do surveys and do try to tie that stuff together.
Oh, yeah.
The more stuff they can bring to bear about this, the higher price they can get for their ads, because the more certainty an advertiser has the ad is working, the more they are willing to pay. That's the end game for all this digital advertising, is increasing price per ad, because as an advertiser, you're not thinking about how much an ad costs. You're thinking how much the ad costs relative to the return that you're getting from the ad. So if you can increase the guarantee or the expected value of the return, then you get higher prices. And you also get higher prices by having more people competing for those ads. So that's also about expanding the platforms, what have access. And again, it's a long journey. It can never be good enough. So they're signed up for building a team that's going to be doing this for a long time. But, this is definitely a great way, in my estimation, to sort of get started. And that's what people should be worried about. They're just worried about Netflix fully engaged, coming from a position of strength into an area that they are also putting all their eggs in, which is sort of this streaming advertising space.
Now, within that space, it leaves you to wonder how the NFL structures some of these deals, because they know Netflix and other streaming services are collecting data on their consumers. Do they have something in place where they have access to that data? Perhaps they could better utilize their ad deals outside of the digital and screen space. The ads that they put in the stadiums or during press conferences. They could have an understanding, for example, of how people who like the Philadelphia Eagles loves to eat Doritos versus people who watch the Arizona Cardinals love to drink Mountain Dew. Knowing that information, they could really best utilize their advertisements outside of the television space. Sometimes it's not necessarily about the deals that the NFL or NBA gets from streaming, but it's about the terms.
So Netflix's wholesale model is the model that you want, which is you pay a fixed cost and then all the upside is yours. Now, that was the case for Hollywood, years and years and years ago, and then talent over time negotiated their way into things like residuals, where they get sort of money as that content is reused over and over again. They can sort of take part in that. And as I understand it, over the last this isn't completely new. Over the last few years, there has been a shift into some sort of residual-like payment structure, even for the streamers. But part of the issue was, or something's resold, part of the issue was like, where are the metrics? So it's being shared, all those sorts of things. And I would say, be careful what you wish for. I think the reality is the world of streaming is so much different than linear television. This is part of why these companies were also insane to sort of abandon this beautiful business model. In linear TV, when you're on the cable bundle, there's a finite number of channels, and more importantly, there's a finite set of time. If you're on NBC at 9 p.m. on Thursdays, you're going to be a successful show. Now, of course, shows would not work, but that's because they weren't as successful sort of as they could have been. But when you're on streaming, there's an affirmative customer choice to go watch your show. It's not just because it's on. The customer has to go and watch it. And so what's happening is you're getting more akin to internet dynamics. It's not you're in the newspaper that is delivered to people's steps so they read it. No, they have to go to your website. They have to click on the article. They have to go see what is being read. And what we see on the internet with the dynamics is you get these very steep sort of exponential curves where if you hit it massively large.
Mm-hmm.
If you're medium, you're kind of okay, and everyone else is in the long tail. And the long tail in this case is might as well go on YouTube, right? Like so to the extent talent wants metrics in a world of streaming, it's going to work out exceptionally well for some of them. And I think it's going to be a real sort of cold splash of water for a bunch of other ones.
And we're seeing it play out with Paramount Plus, Peacock, Disney Plus, and to a degree, ESPN Plus. With them going direct to consumer, none of them have even come close to being profitable when it comes to streaming. They have to diversify their portfolios. Companies like Paramount and Peacock still licensing out shows. ESPN partnering up with gambling companies to open up ESPN bets and get into that industry. A lot of these players have quickly jumped into streaming, not quite understanding the consumer behavior outside of the traditional cable bundle. And again, unlike the NFL, I'm wondering how the NBA is going to really do when there's a Pelicans Orlando Magic game on. Are consumers really going to click on that? Or will another movie or just another choice will catch their eye at the bottom of the screen? This is a brand new barrier for sports leagues when you're looking outside of the lump sum of money that they got. And that's only if the streaming companies are going to be willing to share that information. Because best believe they're going to use those metrics in the next round of negotiations.
Right. Well, because before the barrier was just to get a movie made and to get it into the theater. Once you cross that much higher barrier, then yes, there was much more money made. And another thing you see in sort of market after market, right? Say you were selling software in the 1980s. You had to package up the software to be on a floppy disk or whatever it might be, had to get into Circuit City or like whatever sort of store, PC mall or whatever it would be selling on. And yeah, you would probably sell a decent amount, but the vast majority of people never cross that barrier. You fast forward to, say, the App Store, anyone can publish an app.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you can publish an app? There's a whole lot of competition, right? And prices are driven down to zero. You don't have box software that is $50, $100, $200. You have 99 cents if you're lucky, or you're free and you have to get some, hope that you get people to subscribe or ads or whatever it might be. I speaking of the App Store, the Apple TV Plus in here is funny. Apple TV Plus is just a spoiler. Like, they're in there just to muck stuff up. Apple's good about like customer acquisition. That's what they're they want to get people on their platform. But at the end of the day, this came up. I was thinking about this a lot when so YouTube they share their ad revenue with their creators, and it gives them an astronomical moat. But it is, frankly, it's tough on the economics. Like you're sharing 60% of your revenue directly with your creators or whatever the number is. And so you fast forward to a world of shorts, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, or Facebook Reels, whatever it is, TikTok. And from a Facebook perspective, from a Meta perspective, you don't want to compensate creators. Like your whole business model is predicated on you get all your content for free, and then you get to have ads around that. So YouTube is talking about, we got to do a revenue share on shorts, right? And it's actually a hard problem because it's what do you attribute the ad to? Like if you're watching a YouTube video and they show an ad in the middle of it, and then you keep watching the YouTube video, it's clear who is driving the view of that ad. So, but I think there's an aspect of YouTube wants to do it, not just because that's also sort of their brand as far as creators go, but also they're in third place, and they can really screw with TikTok and Facebook to the extent
sweeten the pot.
There's an expectation that creators are going to get compensated, which Facebook does not want to be in that game at all. That's a very slippery slope as far as their entire sort of cost structure is concerned.
And it shows you they're willing to muddy up the waters the same way Tidal came out of nowhere and got in between Spotify and Apple Music. They could never really gain market share, but they were sort of in the way. Very similar to what the ABA did to the NBA. You had a bunch of investors come together and take up market share, but not necessarily the whole pie. And the NBA had no choice but to come through and buy them out in order to get them out the way. The Brooklyn Nets, the Indiana Pacers, and there's a few other teams in the league. they're extensions of the ABA. I believe some of those families still get paid out of the NBA teams today. Some of the minority team owners of the Pacers are from those families. But as you can see, the in-house ad tech is the way to go, and Netflix as well as Amazon are trying to build that up, and they need inventory, and they're handing out a lot of money right now for the current moment. But make no mistake about it, in the future, once they wheel those companies in and them realizing they have to compete on a whole nother level to regain audience attention, it's going to be very interesting to see how they play their positions. This is a very good pivot for Netflix, moving away from the subscription-based model, because eventually it's going to hit a ceiling. And this year they released statements saying that they will no longer announce their subscriber counts. So it all makes sense for them to start building out an ad tier to diversify their revenue. The only real question that's left is if Netflix and Amazon will let the sports leagues have access to that data.